Thank you, Khaki Labs, for inviting me to give this talk on the ancient city of Bharukacha, Barigaza, which is my native town from where I hail, and which has been an object of my research for a long time. So, in today's talk, I will attempt to map the maritime history of the port of Bharuch. The ancient port of Bharuch, as we know, stands on the river Narmada. It is situated 30 miles up the Narmada estuary, and its vicinity seems to have been inhabited right from the proto-historic period. Archaeological explorations show that Bharuch rose during the Iron Age period. Two rammed mud features rising 3 meters above the mud banks were identified as an ancient anchorage. There may also be eroded remains of wharfs on the river. There are faint indications of remains of a port because Bharuch has been built and rebuilt. There is a saying in Gujarati, Bhangyu, Bhangyu, Toye Bharuch. The modern town of Bharuch, in fact, stands on the ancient mount, and therefore detailed excavations have not been possible. The limited excavations which have been carried out indicate that this city was in existence for a very long period, and its history goes back at least to the first millennium BC. Excavations also revealed red polished ware and existence of a bead industry. Painted grey ware was also found and its distribution was found up to Ujjain, which was on the supply route of Bharuch. There are many indications to understand the historicity of Bharuch town. The harbor of Bharuch was frequented since ancient times by traders, and many literary sources and even numismatic evidences are there regarding its maritime activities. So the Buddhist Jatakas, circa 5th century BC, gives us ample evidence of Bharuch's trade with distant lands. The label of Patan was attached to it in the Jatakas. The Baveru Jatak shows Bharuch's trade connection with Babylon. Baveru is Babylon. The Bharu Jatak notes that a Bodhisattva came with a group of traders from the cold regions to buy salt and vinegar from Bharuch. The Suparaka Jataka, related to Sopara, present-day Nala Sopara, mentions a Bodhisattva who was a boatman from Bharuch. And the Sursondi Jataka highlights Bharuch's trade connection with Sumatra. Bharuch also had trade connections with Suvarnabhumi and China. We come to know of its trade connections with Sri Lanka because there is a Jain work called Vividha Tirth Kalp, which mentions that a Sri Lankan princess had come to Bharuch and had built a temple called the Shakunika Vihar. The Chaitya of the 20th Tirthankar was also here, and a grand derasar today has been constructed there. It is now called the Shakunika Vihar. It was constructed in 1989. Jain Agam literature, Katha Sarit Sagar, these are other literary sources which often make references to Bharuch and its port activities. The urban milieu of Bharuch is indicated by the mention of it as a nagar or a town in Katha Sarit Sagar. The Bharukach kingdom probably consisted of the territories between the Narmada and the Mahi, for the Puranas also refer to it as Bharukach Samahya. According to a Jaina tradition, King Pradyot of Ujjaini ruled over Bharukach around 550 BC. He is believed to be a contemporary of Lord Mahavir and of the Magadhan ruler Bimbisara. The term Bhrigukach or Bharukach has been found in most of the early sources, including the Buddhist work Divya Vadana and the Sabha Parv of Mahabharata. Epigraphic evidence from Junagadh, Nasik, Ajanta, Junnar, they also use the term Bharukach to refer to this place. Varamihira, the astronomer in 6th century CE, describes this place as Bharukacha. There is another name of the city, Bhrigukacha, which is associated with the legend of the town being established by Bhrigu Rishi. Many consider that Bharukach is a corruption of the word Bhrigukacha, but lately scholars have argued that This term has not been found in earlier literature and in epigraphic evidences, and this term came to be used only around the 10th century CE. Its ancient name Bharukach itself it is derived from the words Bharu, which means sea, and Kutch, which even today means a coastal region. Today, Bara or Baru in Gujarati language has come to mean a port from where one can enter from the sea to the river's mouth. So etymologically, it seems that the modern name of Bharuch has been derived from the ancient name Bharukach. The term Baruz, Bhadoch, Broch, these are the other terms used in the long history of this port town by different political powers. The Jain Churnis refer to it as Dronamukha, that is to say, having access both to land and sea routes. It also had a trade with the coastal ports of western coast. Bharuch did indeed have command over an extensive highland and foreland, extensive hinterland and foreland. It was considered as a premier port of Gujarat from around the 1st century BCE to 300 CE. It commanded a vast hinterland reaching Ujjain in central India and beyond the northern plains. Its foreland reached out to the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea area. Greek and Roman texts by Strabo, Pliny, Periplus, Ptolemy, they have umpteen references to this port as Barigaza or Bargoza. The name Baruz came to be used by Arab travelers of the 10th century AD, and it was in circulation in the medieval period. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, which was written in the 1st century AD, furnishes us with a vivid description of the trade which was carried on from the ancient port of Bharuch. Ships from Barigaza frequented Caen, Mosha, Limerick, that is the country of the Tamils. It also had trade with Apologus and Oman in the Persian Gulf, as well as with Rome. Trading vessels set sail for the entrepot of Barigaza from the port of Barbaricum, which is modern day Banbhor in Pakistan, at the mouth of the river Indus. Since Banbhor had become difficult to access, we see that a lot of goods was being sent to Banbhor from Central Asia, even right from China, and then from Barigaza, the trade was further conducted. The port of Bharuch, as noted in the Periplus, was dangerous to approach due to shoals or sandbars. Native fishermen were specially appointed at the entrance of the river to pilot them safely to Bharuch. The Periplus, in its section 44, informs us that there were special pilot vessels called trapakas, which were operated by the native fishermen employed by the king, and they were used to guide the merchant ships through these dangerous sandbars. These guards would also sometimes veer away the ships bound for Sopara, which was a rival port. The high tides were another major problem for sailors coming into the Gulf of Khambat. Significantly, these high tides actually facilitated the crossing to the Barigaza because they provided the good depth of water which was necessary for ships to cross the mudflats and the shoals at the mouth of the Narmada. Once these obstacles were conquered, the ships could navigate upstream and anchor in the deep basins. The Periplus mentioned some deep spots along the Narmada where incoming ships could berth. Such berthing points were also noticed during archaeological explorations. Bharuch fell under the region described as Lat. The Periplus describes the port as being under the Kshatrapa ruler Nahapan. The Nasik inscriptions of Ushavadatta, the son-in-law of Nahapan, also mentions Bharukach in his donation. And the Jaina tradition also corroborates the control of Nahapan at Bharuch. There is mention of dramas and dirhams being used. Coins of Menander and Apollodotus of the Indo-Greek Bactrian family were found to be in circulation at Barigaza. This port flourished during the Kshatrapa rule and was also coveted by the Satavahanas because of its commercial importance. The Satavahanas had in fact gained control over it for some time, after which it was regained by the Kshatrapas. So this port can be called formally as the true gateway to India, as it was connected by so many trade routes converging at Barigaza. One sea route connected it to South Arabia and Egypt and also to the Persian Gulf. Another route connected it to Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. It was the collecting point for goods from Deccan, from Ujjain, and even from China. The silk used to come here by land route. By the beginning of the Christian era, Bharuch had monopolized all the import and export trade of North and Central India. It was an important center of textile production and an entrepot where goods from the interiors of India arrived to be shipped abroad, and where goods of various foreign countries were received. Goods as far from Kabul and Kashmir came to Bharuch for export. Among the important items for trade, we see that the most important item, especially when the Roman trade was going on, was of course wine. Ujjain and Mahishmati rose to be big wine markets selling Roman wine. Other items of trade mentioned are frankincense, copper, tin, coral, topazes, thin cloth of inferior sort, glass, medicinal plants, storax, gold and silver coins. Singing boys, pretty maidens, and slaves were also imported, particularly from the Persian Gulf. Dates and pearls were also an important item of import. The Periplus mentions pearls being sent from Oman. Lead was imported from Arabia. It notes that ships filled with copper, sandalwood, and timbers of teak wood and logs of blackwood and ebony were sent from Apologus and Oman. Other exports, of course, were food grains and items like rice, edible oil, sugar, long pepper, spikenard, which was a herb from the Himalayas, semi-precious stones, emeralds, sapphires, horns, animals like peacocks, the spice costus, the gum, bdellium, yellow dye, indigo, muslin, cotton, silk, hides from China were all items of trade. James Forbes, in his Oriental Memoirs, writing in the 18th century, mentions that many of these items continued to be traded in even right up till the 18th century from Bharuch and Khambhat. Bharuch was the primary port when the Roman trade was at its zenith. But even when the trade with Rome declined, it continued to have a prosperous trade and is mentioned along with Hatab near Bhavnagar in the Sanskrit Brahmi inscriptions left by Indic seafarers at the Hok Caves in the island of Socotra in the Gulf of Aden. These Hok Caves have got a lot of epigraphs in Brahmi and Kharoshti. And these are very interesting because the names of mariners from Bharuch and even graffiti of ships are all found in these Hok Caves. Ranabir Chakravarti has argued that the trade of Bharuch was not dependent on the external stimuli provided by the Mediterranean trade, and therefore it survived even when the Roman trade declined. Matthew Cobb also has challenged Warmington's theory, which was a very Eurocentric, Roman-centric theory about India's engagement in the maritime trade. And he says that India's engagement in the trade between Rome and India was not of a passive character, but was a very active involvement of traders is seen. Especially when we look at the inscriptions of the Hok Caves, we see many sailors and captains of Bharuch arriving there with their own vessels, indicating their active involvement in foreign trade. They were also graffiti images of multi-masted ships found at the Hok Caves, which are very, very similar to those seen in the coins of the Satvahana ruler Yajna Satakarni, which further corroborates that India was an active participation in the foreign trade happening in the Indian Ocean region. The port of Bharuch began to lose its primacy gradually after the 7th century. In 640 AD, when Yuan Sang visited Bharuch, he mentions it as Bharugacha, and he renders it in Chinese as Polu Kichi Po. He talks of it as a separate kingdom with salty and barren island where salt was produced. He does not give a very flattering description of Bharuch. He mentions that the people here were devoid of emotions and had no tradition of learning. He mentions the existence of Buddhist viharas and temples. We do not know why he gave such a description, but probably he visited certain coastal areas near Bharuch like Wagra, Amod, Jambusar. However, he does note that the prosperity of Bharuch was only due to its sea trade. The account does not give an indication of a very flourishing long distance trade. During the period of the Gurjaras and the Chamanas, Bharuch and its vicinity, this is around the 6th, 7th century AD, Bharuch and its vicinity began to face attacks by the Arabs of Sindh. A coalition of rulers, including the Gurjara Pratihara ruler Nagabhatta and the Chalukyan ruler Pulakesi, they managed to come together to push back the Arab invasion in 738 AD. By the time of the Rashtrakutas, that is from 788 to 942 CE, we see that the trade of Bharuch was facing slight reverses, mainly because of increasing siltation and also because of Arab piracy, which had been hampering trade. It is around this time we see a lot of mention of Bharuch in the Arab writers' accounts. At the same time, the Arab writers are also mentioning trade activities at Sindan or Sanjan, which was now coming up as an important port under the Rashtrakutas. It is possible that Bharuch was gradually being superseded by towns like Sanjan and later by Khambat. The Solanki rulers had built a strong fortress at Bharuch in the 11th century AD, but they were mainly patronizing Khambat as their prime port, and Bharuch sometimes seems to have been serving as a feeder port for Khambat, yet its trade was quite immense. The increasing attacks on Bharuch had led to the construction of a strong fort around sometime in the 11th century. The folklores attribute this construction to King Kumarapal, but most historians think that this fort was built by Siddharaj Jaisingh of Anilwad in around in around the 10th, 11th century AD. Additions and repair to this fort was, of course, done later on in the medieval period by Sultan Bahadur Shah of Gujarat. He repaired the fort, and there is an inscription regarding it in the mosque, which is near the Furza. The wall, the fort wall, was a long one stretching 1400 kilometers with 19 bastions along the banks of the Narmada, and it was probably very essential for the defense of the port city. Most of the port cities of the medieval India were walled cities. The Furza, or the place where the customs was collected, was the entry point. There were many gates to this fort. The names of the gates also indicate the trade of this place. There was one gate called Malabari Darwaza, Makkah Darwaza. This indicates that Hajj pilgrims went to Mecca and there was a flourishing trade with Malabar. There were sea gates also near Nawachauki, Bhagakot, and Undai. There were 3 land gates called the Katopar Darwaza, Soneri Darwaza, Jhadeshwari Darwaza. There was strict checking and tolls collected from goods entering into the city. Arab travelers noted its prosperity. They called it as Al-Baruz. Al-Baruni had called it as Bihroz. The textiles of Bharuch were sometimes called as Bahrusi. Al-Idrusi in around 1000 AD CE found the people there to be very rich and undertaking journeys to far-off lands for the purpose of trade. Vessels from China would visit Java and then arrive at Bharuch. Marco Polo also talks about Bharuch. He mentions that the Brahman traders of Bharuch were honest. Ibn Khurdad Bey in 912 AD, Al-Masudi in 915 to 944 AD, talks about the prosperity of the port of Bharuch, and he also mentions the Arab attacks in the 9th and 10th century. Up till the 12th century, we still keep on hearing about many vessels arriving here from China and Sindh with costly merchandise. So the port, you can see some of the watchtowers here in this satellite image. The bastions are also visible. This is the fort along the river. You can see all this greenery because the river has dried up. The bastions are also there. The main bastion where the garrison was kept, close by ammunitions were stored. This is a very impressive structure. On this side also you can see fortification. There were ditches and moats dug around, and water from the Narmada as well as the two lakes Ratan Talav and Fatah Talav were diverted to improve the defense of the city. So this port town does not really decline even in the 11th, 12th century. Although Khambat had superseded it, but its maritime trade is indicated from a coin hoard, which was found in the 18th, 19th century from near the Panchayat Wadi in Bharuch. When workers were doing some digging, they found a brass pot filled with these coins. And this coin hoard is very interesting because it shows coins dating from 1260 to 1380 AD. And these coins are from various places, from Venice, Genoa, Egypt, Armenia, Persia, also coins of the Mamelukes. These coins indicate that Bharuch had trade with Iran, as well as it had continued links with the Eastern Mediterranean shore for trade and the Red Sea. Even literary sources corroborate that in the 15th century, Bharuch had an immense trade, because there is a literary work called Shripal Charitra, which talks of Dhaval Seth as a well-known merchant from Kosambi visiting Bharuch with gold, spices, etc. Like most vibrant port cities, Bharuch developed a cosmopolitan atmosphere. From the several myths and legends associated with the early history of Bharuch, we come to know of its importance as a holy place or a Tirth Sthan for Hindus and Jains. The Bhavishyotter Purana mentions that goddess Lakshmi chose the site of Bharuch where the Navnaths reside as her abode. The Navnath temples are located at different places on the river bank. The temple of Bhrigu Rishi, the villages of Bhadbut, Shuklatit, these are all holy places, and religious fairs are regularly held there. These places have been giving Bharuch a religious sanctity as a tirth. Even for the Muslims, it has been considered as a very holy place. The Muslims called it as the Piran Tekri, because many of their peers and Sufis who frequented this port have been buried, and there are dargahs here. The one of the gates is called the Haji Pir Kirmani Darwaza, because the shrine of this Pir is located there. There is another shrine called the Baba Rehan Shrine. A big Jummah Masjid was constructed later during the Sultanate period. Bharuch also had Jain temples and Buddhist stupas, as seen from the description of Huinsang. The Parsis who arrived from Iran sometime after the 7th, 8th century to Gujarat also chose Bharuch as one of their earliest settlements, probably due to its importance as a port town. One of the oldest Agyaris of the Parsis, called the Kathaparni Agyari or the Dastur Agyari, is located in the fort area and overlooks the Narmada. Scribes from Iran are noted to have come here and copied religious manuscripts. The Parsis later are noted as weavers, traders, and industrialists contributing to the economy of Bharuch. The Jewish presence is also seen in the 11th and 12th century at Bharuch, and recently a marker has been placed at the Raichand Deepchand Library, which talks about the international trade which was carried by Jews from outside with India, particularly with Bharuch. So the Jews came from North Africa to Aden, and from there to the western coast of India. This marker which has been put mentions that a Moroccan Jew took refuge in Bharuch after being attacked by pirates in Thana. It also mentions items of import by the Jews like sorghum, iron, textiles. This indicates that there was a flourishing trade going on by the Jewish merchants from Bari Gaza. This port towns has recently been argued by James Kurkilamkat as have been one of the first landing places of Saint Thomas the Apostle in 52 CE, and he has tried to make a link with Sandruka Andropolis, which is mentioned in the Acts of Thomas. He wants to show that Bari Gaza was the first place where Christianity entered into India. We do not know much about the spread of Syrian Christianity in India. The only evidence we have is of a Syrian Christian church near the Tower Road in Bharuch, but it does not seem to be a very, very old one. The port of Bharuch was a flourishing one when the Europeans entered India after the discovery of the direct sea route. The Portuguese attacked the city thrice in the 16th century, in spite of the fact that it had a strong fort and had recently been renovated by Sultan Bahadur Shah in 1528. One of the Portuguese generals, George de Menezes, who sacked and raided Bharuch in 1547, later took the surname Baroch. The commanding appearance of Bharuch on top of a hillock surrounded by the fort walls impressed travelers. The Gazetteer of 1961 notes, the Portuguese admired the city with its castle like Lisbon, its magnificent and costly houses with their costly lattices, the famous ivory and blackwood workshops, and its townsmen were well skilled in mechanics, chiefly weavers who made the finest cloth in the world. This description was there through for another 3-4 centuries. In the 16th century, Surat superseded the port of Khambat and Bharuch. Due to continuous silting of the Bharuch port, we see that only small ships were able to move into the Bharuch harbor. The Aine Akbari notes that larger maritime vessels could not easily sail up to the shallowing Narmada, and instead they were using subsidiary or subordinate ports further down the coast. Smaller local boats such as tawris were used to bring the cargo to the coast. Hasot, Gandhar, they are mentioned as subsidiary ports by Abu Fazl. Bharuch came under the direct control of the Mughals along with Surat by 1572-73 AD. And the Aine Akbari does praise Bharuch as a fine port and a maritime town of first-rate importance. But the Mughals preferred to develop Surat as their main port on the west coast. S. Arasaratnam points out that after the Mughal conquest of Gujarat, there was an attempt to centralize all the long-distance trade at Surat with a view to help consolidate the collection of customs. And even though Bharuch saw some maritime activity, long-distance maritime activity, it seems that most of the ships were those owned by the royal family and of the high officials. The harbor, the places like Hasot, which are mentioned in the Aine Akbari, can be seen here in the map. There is also a lot of presence of these sandbars. This Alia Bait, which you see here in this map, is actually a giant sandbar which is growing, in fact. The port activities of Bharuch continued because of it being linked to manufacture of piece goods. The Europeans were keen on securing textiles from Bharuch. The English established their first factory at Surat in 1608 AD. They soon discovered that they could get textiles cheaper at Bharuch than at Surat. And since Bharuch was very conveniently located, it was navigable by boat by the sea route to Surat, which was quite safe, and also it was connected by the land route. The English decided to have a factory later on at Bharuch. Nicholas Downton, the Surat factor, had heard that ships of 300 tons could be brought close to the walls of the town of Bharuch, and therefore later the English and later even the Dutch established their factories here. They wanted the Bharuch goods, especially the textiles, the famous calicos and baftas, for their long distance trade with the Red Sea region and also with Southeast Asia. Bharuch was famous for its white and light blue taftas. These were also shipped to England. There were other textiles mentioned in the factory records like Bairams, Kandikins, Trikins. Some of these textiles no longer exist. Many of these were taken to Bantam. The length of the Bharuch baftas was slightly more than the one found at Surat. So it was like 20 and half covids as compared to 17 and half covids. The British were buying a lot of piece goods from Bharuch, and they also faced a lot of competition from the Dutch. The Bharuch factory the Bharuch factory of the English had come up by 1618, and the Dutch had established a factory here by 1617, and both were competing for the textile goods of Bharuch. The Bharuch as well as Ankleshwar area at one point of time supplied around 400 forges for the Bantam and the Basra markets. The Port town became a scene of maritime rivalry because the Portuguese were not very happy when the Mughals gave the English and the Dutch permission to trade in Gujarat. So they began to attack the Gujarati ships for not allowing them to trade on terms similar to those of the Portuguese. The English were attacking Gujarati ships and the Portuguese were attacking the Mughal ships. So therefore, the Mughals were quite caught in this maritime rivalry, and they had allowed the English to establish factories at Surat and Bharuch only when they were convinced that the English naval strength will be used for the protection of the Mughal ships. The English and the Dutch granted passes to the Gujarati vessels and protected them from the Portuguese. By 1622, we see that the English are not only buying cloth, they are also buying yarn. Yarn was also being bought by merchants visiting Bharuch from Malabar. The weavers often were not very happy when huge supplies of yarn were being purchased by the English because it meant a reduction of yarn for making their own textile goods. After the famine of 1630-32, the quality of Gujarat textiles began to deteriorate because of the large-scale migration as well as death of many skilled weavers. And after that, we see that the finest piece goods came from Bengal to the European market. By 1652, the demand of goods from England also fell, and the textile goods were now mainly being exported to the Red Sea and Southeast Asia. There are many European travelers who have, in their travel accounts, talked about the excellent bleaching of cloth being done at Bharuch. So Thievenot, Philip Beldius, Tavernier, they mention this bleaching of cloth done, and they talk about the peculiar properties of the river Narmada, which helped the bleaching of the cloth. Tavernier even mentions that a large number of lemons were used for bleaching calicos, and they were available in the Bharuch Navsari region. Indigo from Bayana and Agra was also available at Bharuch. Jambusar close by supplied indigo, but it was of a slightly inferior quality. So indigo, which was used for dyeing of cloths, was another major industry at Bharuch. The quality of bleaching and dyeing was better, and rates were cheaper at Bharuch rather than Surat. So a lot of dyeing was done here. The baftas of white, black, red, blue colors, they were all dyed at Bharuch. And Bharuch during this period also became a center supplying bread and butter to the Western ships. In fact, the English had established a bakery here. It was also noted as a shipbuilding center. And Mendelssohn, the European, refers to the large quantity of timber which was brought into Bharuch from distant parts, and a lot of ships were made here as well as at Surat. Parsis known and Hindu carpenters, the Parsis known as Wadiyas, were basically shipbuilders. It was also a place of military importance during the period of the Mughals, and a Mughal guard or garrison was posted in the fort. The Dutch presence can be seen here for a very long period from the Dutch tombstones which we see here. There was a sundial in the Bharuch Dutch factory. Unfortunately, it has been pulled down. These are the Dutch tombs. Uh, the place was Bharuch was a place of military importance. A Mughal garrison was posted in the fort, and all the commodities had to pay a custom duty of 2%. Apart from the local production, there was a steady stream of supplies from Baroda and Dabhoi. Also, traders from Dabhol, Malabar were coming here. The governor of Bharuch, called Yaqub Khan, in 1630 had wide business interests. The English and the Dutch later on stopped their factories at Bharuch, and their trade had declined. The securing of textiles from Bharuch had come down. Bharuch was besieged by Aurangzeb during the War of Succession. His army had suffered much due to lack of fresh water and provisions, and this had made him uh, put a curse on Bharuch, and he called it as Sukhabad. He had pronounced a curse on the one who would rebuild the walls, but ironically, he himself had to do so when he faced repeated Maratha raids. In 1696, Aurangzeb was also very much troubled by the activities of the pirate Ivory. And therefore, he had put some English traders of Surat and Bharuch in prison. They were released only after a promise to fight piracy on the seas. After Aurangzeb's death, we see central authority declining. By 1736, Bharuch came under the control of the Nawabs. During the rule of the Nawabs, the powerful Marathas under Damaji Gaikwad had gained a share in the income from the customs of the port. Surat also had a share in the custom revenue, but after the Nawab became independent, he had stopped paying the Surat share. A few years after the British had acquired control of the Surat castle, they began to demand payment of this Surat share from the Nawab Mazad Khan, and this had led to a dispute. The English had claimed that the Nawab had also been collecting a lot of enhanced duties on English protected goods, and therefore, when the Nawab was not able to pay the money which the English were asking, the English attacked Bharuch. Their first expedition failed, but in the next expedition in 1772, the Nawab was defeated, and the English got control over Bharuch. For a brief period during the colonial times, we see a lot of economic activities, particularly the beginning of export of raw cotton to China. Uh, Even at that point of time, some textiles were also being sent, but gradually the textile trade of Bharuch was declining. The famous sailcloth and muslin was still being sent, but there is a gradual decline in a lot of these manufactures. Bharuch briefly came under the control of the Marathas. The Scindias had control over it from 1783 to 1803, and the English managed to re-establish control after the Anglo-Maratha wars. And by 1803, we see once again the establishment of colonial control. During the colonial period, we see the sea trade of Bharuch gradually declining. Agriculture was rich, commerce and manufactures, however, were rapidly declining. Till the 17th century, we still hear about ships going to Java, Sumatra, and even to Aden and Red Sea. But a lot of the activities are overtaken at first by Surat and later by Bombay. The Narmada was increasingly silting, and we hear often about Europeans mentioning how difficult it was for ships of huge tonnage to anchor at Bharuch. The trade in textiles and particularly the trade with the African and the African market and Arabia began to decline during the colonial period. There was no more demand for the special cloth which was being manufactured at Bharuch from the African market, and the trade with Arabia also declined due to the Mocha blockade. A general depression had set in by 1820, and by 1845 we hardly hear of any textiles being manufactured at Bharuch. In 1820, Bharuch had exported textiles worth 4,25,000, but by 1849, its cloth export was less than 10,000 rupees. So we see that its textile trade declined and its overseas commerce was affected by that. Gradually, the trade of Bharuch was converted into a coasting trade to the south towards Bombay, and also, there are other intermediate ports towards which the trade was diverted. It also had a trade with Mandvi in the Kutch. Bharuch was affected very much when the industrial revolution started and the demand for the calicos dried up. Many weavers and merchants began to migrate to Bombay. The entry of Manchester cloth had gradually made weaving quite unprofitable. The decline of the sea trade as well as the cart traffic was further heightened when the railways were introduced in 1864. Shipping had really declined, and we can see some figures of the ships being made at Bharuch till 1795. There was a Parsi family called the Dalal family, which owned 21 large and small vessels around 1795. And we hear of many Hindu ship owners also having Fatemars and Botelas. Most of these were being used for export of raw cotton, agricultural produce, and was mainly confined to coastal trade. But later on, even these shipping activities began to decline, and Bharuch was gradually reduced to a center of local trade. During the export of raw cotton, we also see a lot of ginning mills coming up. Here you can see an old ginning factory belonging to the Vakharia family. The export of raw cotton happening from Bharuch also ceased later on, particularly by sea, and its producers and merchants began to fall in debt. During the American Civil War period, at one point of time, the Bharuch shore saw a lot of activity, and a lot of people earned their fortunes by exporting raw cotton from Bharuch to Bombay. In 1937, we see that when the new railway bridge was built, the sand which was removed during the installation of the pillars, which was almost 1 lakh ton, remained on the riverbed, and it obstructed the flow of the river. And in many places, we see more sandbars coming up. The water became increasingly shallow, big ships stopped coming, and the port activities of Bharuch gradually began to cease. Once upon a time, a lot of dates and coconuts were imported, even in the 20th century. But that too was seeing a great reduction. 500 ships from Basra, Iraq would bring in around 15 lakh ton dates, which would then be transported to Rajasthan, central India, and other cities of Gujarat. A single vessel carrying around 1.25 lakh coconuts would enter Bharuch, and around 10 to 12 crore coconuts would arrive from Malabar and Goa. All this gave a lot of employment to people near the Furza, where they were specially employed to remove the coconut husk. Cotton and tuar dal, these were the principal produce of Bharuch district, and these continued to be sent to Bombay, but more by railway later on. The Memons and Moplas had once upon a time carried a flourishing trade with Bharuch. Cottonseed, lentils, timber from Chota Udaipur, all these was being sent from Bharuch to the ports of Saurashtra. Also, we see oil, groundnuts, then oil cakes, all these were being imported from Saurashtra ports by Bharuch. So the long distance overseas commerce had ceased, but this trade was going on in the towards the end of the 19th and 20th century. However, it was becoming very difficult because ships had to wait for high tide to come towards the port, and sometimes it would take them 4 to 5 days to come from the sea to the mouth of the river. And the sandbars were also posing a great danger. The ships therefore began to use the ports of Saurashtra like Bhavnagar instead of Bharuch. Money was given in the second and third 5-year plans, but that was not enough for reviving the port activities of Bharuch. You can see that the river remains dried up for most part of the year, and therefore the ships could not enter into the harbor. A jetty was constructed during the second and third 5-year plan, which was capable of docking about 15 big vessels. But all that was not enough. And today the Furja wears a very desolate look. The port office, the Jakat Naka, is there only as a physical remain, but the maritime activities of Bharuch have completely ceased. The river seems to have changed its course, and it remains half dried for major part of the year. Only during the monsoons we see a lot of flooding. The reduction of water supply from upstream due to the Narmada Dam may have also led to some changes. So this is the image of the jetty in around 1955, and this is another image which I had clicked sometime in 2000. We can see that by 2000, the river has dried up near the Furja, and hardly any activity is going on. So today we see that the low-lying areas which get flooded, they also do not have any kind of manufacturing activity. Today, Dahej is being is coming up as a prominent port, and there is a great doubt that Bharuch at any point of time will see a revival of its maritime activity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. It was really a fascinating talk. I am familiar with a bit of Bharuch because I had family also from there, but had no idea that it had such a rich and diverse history. There are lots of course, compliments in the chat about how wonderful this talk was, but I'm just going to quickly get to the questions.
Yes.
One was about Ujjain and the wine market, and that was quite fascinating. So, can you just expand a little bit about that, a little more detail?
Yeah. So a lot of goods were coming in from Bharuch, and Ujjain was on the trade route going towards the north. And we hear of Ujjain and Mahishmati as important wine marts when there was a lot of trade in the Roman period. I do not have more reference
Okay.
to it, but there is
Okay.
mention of a lot of different types of wine, particularly Italian wines being brought. And archaeological excavations have also thrown up amphora sherds, and a lot of work has been done by Sunil Gupta trying to understand the Roman trade on the Indian Ocean coast. So there are mentions about Roman wine being imported into India.
Okay, that's quite something. Also, there's another question about that. That with its record of maritime trade over the centuries, there would have been many merchant guilds in the area. So, anything you could tell us about that
Yeah,
in
there is
relation to the
mention of
ruling dynasties? Yeah, sorry.
there is mention of merchant guilds, Shrenis, etc. But I do not have much information. The ruling dynasties, they had been encouraging trade, but these trade guilds functioned to regulate affairs regarding manufactures. However, I don't have much information about the merchant guilds, but they were an important part of the maritime commerce, both in the ancient as well as during the medieval period.
Right. So Pratap from Baroda, I think he's asking about Baroda. Do you have any info regarding the location of the ancient fort and the related structures like warehouses where consignments from the Gangetic Valley
Unfortunately, archaeological explorations have not thrown much physical remains. A lot of the cities built on the ancient structure. So explorations and
Uh, would be
a
stored
little
till
bit
the.
of excavations which have happened have not really thrown much of these structures. So we do not know where these warehouses were. Probably they were in the internal part of the town, and they were not maybe at the Furja. The Dutch later on had a factory near the Furja, which they later shifted to the Kothi. Even today, there is this area
Okay.
in Kothi Road called Valandani Factory. But prior to that, they had a warehouse at the Furja itself. However,
Hmm.
not much physical structure of the ancient period is unearthed. Time and again, when houses are being constructed, sometimes we see
Hmm.
potsherds, or we see beads or glass pieces. But we do not really know which were the warehouses where these goods were brought. But definitely they must have existed.
Given the importance of the Ashoka edict in Junagadh and, considering Gujarat's region, as a major province under the Mauryans, do we have any other Mauryan activity reported from this fort region?
No. We hear of these Buddhist stupas being mentioned by Yuin Sang, but I do not know much about the activity during the time of the Mauryans from Bharuch. However, continuously we have the local dynasties, particularly the Kshatrapas, later on the Satavahanas, they are very much involved in the flourishing trade. I think during the Mauryan period, it may have had less overseas commerce, and the
Hmm.
trade was developed more in the first century BCE. So
Okay.
I do not have much information about the Mauryan activity. The Jatakas give us
Hmm.
some information about the activities, but the besides the Jatakas, we do not have a reference to the trade happening from this region. So it's more of
Okay.
literary sources like the Baveru Jataka and the Sursondi Jataka and stuff like that.
Hmm. Okay, what was the role of the Parsis in the commercial and social life in Bharuch, as many prominent families hail from Bharuch?
Uh, the Parsis probably chose Bharuch as one of their earliest settlements because it was a maritime town of great importance, and the scribal activities
Hmm.
which are happening between Iran and India at that point of time. Zoroastrian scribes are coming from Iran to Bharuch, copying manuscripts, shows that there
Hmm.
are merchants here who are able to sponsor such kind of activities. And
Hmm.
although most people believe that the Parsis were initially involved more in agriculture, I feel that most of their settlements were on port towns. So there is more of a possibility that they were traders in the first place who later
Hmm.
on acquired land and also got into agricultural activity. Many of them
Hmm.
became very good weavers. In fact, the baftas which were produced in Bharuch, many a time we hear about Parsi weavers producing these exquisite baftas. And we also hear people like Jelinson de Jong talking about the Parsis of Bharuch being so rich before 1630 that they could afford to wear a golden waistband. When Bharuch was under the colonial rule, we see that the export of raw cotton offered
Hmm.
some of the Parsis scope to invest their wealth in establishing ginning industries, and also in getting actively involved in shipping of raw cotton in their own ships, and building ships for others. So this is the time when you have the emergence of families like the Dalals, the Vakhariyas who came from Surat and later made Bharuch their economic base. We also see almost 7 Parsi fire temples coming up in this place. which shows that
Hmm.
there was immense prosperity, especially from the 16th to the 19th century. And therefore, we can say that the Parsis of Bharuch saw a lot of economic prosperity till we see Bombay developing and gradual migration, particularly when weaving activities ceased and the textile production ceased.
Okay. Okay. Also, there was one query as to whether St. Thomas's first century landing was it in Kochi or was it here?
Yeah, so the often told story is that he landed at Kranganore in Kerala. But this
Okay.
researcher is now trying to read the Act of Thomas, and from the
Hmm.
description, he believes that it was not Kerala, but it was Bharuch. But
Okay.
this is just a theory. I don't know whether he has been able to conclusively prove this. We do not see too
Right.
much evidence of other of Syrian Christian churches or a big Syrian Christian population the way we see in Kerala.
Correct. Okay. And another query was, how is Bharuch ranked in prominence with other contemporary ancient ports in Gujarat, such as Porbandar or Khambat?
Uh, you mean present status or the earlier part?
I think at that time.
Well, see, Gujarat has had a history where there has always been one port occupying a very preeminent place, and other ports playing a subsidiary role. So
Mm.
initially we see during the Harappan period it was Lothal. Then later on we see Bharuch becoming an eminent port. And
Mm.
the Saurashtra ports are not mentioned much in they are not mentioned in the Periplus. So I do
Mm.
not know how important they were around the first century AD. But
Mm.
we do hear later on about a lot of trade happening between Bharuch and Saurashtra. Khambat
Mm-hmm.
later on becomes the most important port,
Mm.
superseding Bharuch, as I mentioned in the talk.
Mm.
And when Khambat also began to silt up, most of the time it was geographical factors as well as
Mm.
political patronage, which led
Mm.
to one port becoming more prominent than the other. So
Mm-hmm.
political patronage at Surat made it the most important port, and it superseded Khambat. Also because of geographical reasons, also Khambat had lost its prime position. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole Gujarat coast has been seeing this kind of uh, activity where one port declines and the other takes its place. Um, it's only after the development of Bombay that we see that Gujarat coast loses its primacy, and the Konkan,
Mm-hmm.
the Bombay in Konkan becomes the most important port of Western India.
Okay. There is another query about the name. Bharuch got its name from Bhrigu Rishi, who authored the Bhrigu Samhita. Can you please elaborate on this topic?
Uh, there is a legend that Bhrigu Rishi established Bharuch, and there is a temple also of Bhrigu Rishi near the Narmada coast.
Mm-hmm.
The theory that Aryanization of the south took place with rishis like Bhrigu coming towards the south has often been advanced. We hear that Bhrigu Rishi had managed to do penance and bring the river closer to the town. So there is a
Mm.
lot regarding the legends associated with Bhrigu Rishi.
There is a question that there was, you've spoken extensively about the Parsis, but what about the Bora community in Bharuch?
Yes, the Bohras, they also are extensively involved with trade. I just wanted to show that how different communities from outside also landed at Bharuch, and it had a very vibrant cosmopolitan atmosphere. For the Muslims, including the Bohras, Bharuch was an attractive place both for trade, and it had a it had held a lot of religious importance. The Boharwad today is very close to the Parsiwad, and even now we have a vibrant Bohra population in Bharuch. The way we hear of Bohra traders from Surat, we do not have specific references of some prominent Bohra merchants, but probably they existed.
Okay. Do you have any data on the Dalal family? Somebody has asked a very specific question. R.S. Dalal.
Yes, there is a school which is named after R.S. Dalal. The Dalal family um, started with a business in ghee, and then the members went on to be successful in the shipping industry, in the trade of Bharuch, in the export of raw cotton. I have written an article on the Parsis of Bharuch, which is published in the Journal of the K.R. Kama, where I have given a short history of the Dalal family as also the other prominent families of Bharuch, which you can refer to. It is published in around 2000, 2002.
Okay, there was also the mention of Yagnashri Shattarkarni's. Was that a literary source or was it graffiti?
No, Yajnashri Sattakarni's coins show images of ships with multi-mast, and similar images of ships are seen at the Hawk Caves, which show that the graffiti is about ships which had arrived from Gujarat. And the names of Bharuch traders are found in these Hawk inscriptions. They are mentioned as Naviks, Nirmayakas, which shows that they were bringing their own ships and landing at Sokotra.
Mentioned strong tidal bores of the Narmada at Bharuch that compel the sailors to take help of local pilots to sail through. So,
Yes.
are there any medieval or early modern accounts of describing the same tidal hazards in the Gulf of Cambay?
The tidal activity has been mentioned in several accounts, but we do not hear of any medieval ruler commissioning pilots like that to help bring ships coming into safely, the way it was done during the Kshatrapa period by King Nahapan. So the Periplus mentions that the king used to appoint such pilots to bring the ships safely into the harbor. But such kind of activity, if it was carried out, is not mentioned in any accounts. However, the continuous mention of shoals, sandbars is there in many of the descriptions left by Europeans, particularly even in the Bharuch Gazetteer, we hear about sandbars obstructing the activities of ships, and we keep hearing about the high tides facilitating the ingress of ships into the Bharuch harbor.
Okay, there's just, I think, one more question, and I'm not sure if I'm getting the pronunciations right. Muziris and Varigaza, were both involved in the Indo-Roman trade. Was there any also mention of Berenike?
Yes, Berenike is also mentioned in the Periplus, and in the slide in the map which I had showed that the trade route is going to Berenike, and from there to the Mediterranean Sea. So all these ports are mentioned by the Periplus as important ports in the whole trade network of the Erythraean Sea or the Red Sea Indian Ocean area.
I think we're done with the questions, but Dr. Rajkumar Hans wanted to, would you like to unmute for 2 minutes, and then we're going to have to wrap up. So you wanted to mention something about the Nawab of Bharuch?
Thank you very much, Meher, for your comprehensive account of the trade of Bharuch. I had my PhD from Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda on agrarian economy of Bharuch in the first half of the 19th century. But I came across several interesting kind of facets of Bharuch. Besides being a wonderful port, you see, from the ancient times, though it was overshadowed by Surat in the medieval times, and that became an entreport for and overshadowed, you see, Bharuch. You also mentioned Dahej, obviously, which was closer, which was on the shore itself on the Indian Ocean. Uh, Fair. Anyhow, there is an interesting facet in the 18th century that Nizamul Mulk had conquered this territory and then moved to Hyderabad and established their kind of Nizam rule there. But this was later on declared as a Nawabi, independent Nawab rule, and so on. You mentioned so closely. I think a very interesting facet of Parsis in Bharuch was
I am
that there
aware
was
about how the place was captured.
there was a great divide
Yes,
among
the
the
calendar
uh,
controversy. I
calendar
restricted myself from
controversy.
talking about it. If you want, I can give more details about how
Okay,
Dhanjisha
okay.
Manjisha engineered it.
That is fine. Yeah, but another facet was the importance of Lalu Bhai, who had
Yes,
played Mazmudar Yasi of Bharuch, who had played a
yes,
very important role in the
in the capture.
yeah. Uh, there could also be other things, but I think it is. I will not take your more time. It is a fascinating account that you have given of
So
Bharuch.
there is a lot of interesting stuff regarding the political history of Bharuch, but today I decided to confine myself to the maritime activities of Bharuch as a port. So I did not bring in the calendar controversy and how Dhanjisha Manjisha instigated the
Yeah,
Surat factors to conquer Bharuch by bringing out an old claim on the share of the Surat castle over Bharuch. So the Nawab had not favored him during the
mm,
calendar controversy, and therefore, to take revenge, he had instigated the English, and it is mentioned in the Surat factory records. His role can
yeah.
clearly be brought out. In fact, in my thesis, I have worked a lot on Dhanjisha Manjisha and Mancheji Kharshetji Seth, and how their conflict was responsible for the capture of Bharuch by the English from the hands
That's
of the
right.
Nawab.
That's right.
There is this
Wonderful.
kisse called Kisse Gamgini, which talks
Kisai
about,
Gamgeen.
yeah,
Kisai
Gamgini.
Gamgeen,
Kisse
the
Gamgini.
I think grandfather of K.M. Munshi. Mm,
Okay.
by Kisai Gamgeen. Yeah.
Yeah. So that talks about all of this. And
Yes.
Lallubai, the Diwan, he did
Yeah.
not, he betrayed the Nawab, and that is what
That's right.
led to the colonial rule in Bharuch. So that is
That's right.
another interesting facet of the history of Bharuch.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Hans. And just one last question, Meher. Can you elaborate on the Industrial Revolution and its connection to Bharuch?
Okay. The Industrial Revolution brought in the entry of machine-made cloth. The cotton textiles, the exquisite cotton textiles being produced all over India and even places like Bharuch saw a reduction in demand because the machine-made cloth was cheaper, and the British, because they had political control after 1818, they were able to bring in these goods at a very cheap rate, and raw cotton was being taken away to England to feed the mills of Manchester. So that really dealt a big blow to the textile trade happening from India. The connoisseurs, the people who are patronizing these textiles, the princes, the rich merchant families, even they stopped patronizing many of these exquisite textiles. And that is why the Industrial Revolution, in a way, ended the whole tradition of manufacturing a lot of beautiful textiles in India. When the Industrial Revolution started, places like Bharuch, which had been producing handloom textiles, now got converted into having ginning factories. So raw cotton was separated from the seeds in the ginning factories, and then it was baled. Merwanji Fraser, one Parsi from Surat, had been given a place near what is today's convent school called the Amjad Bagh area, where he could press all these raw cotton into bales or bundles and prepare them in such a way that they could be exported neatly on the ships which were arriving into the Bharuch port. So the British tried their best to introduce the export of raw cotton and in many ways discourage the making of textiles. Some of the first ginning mills were started by the Parsis. If, in fact, Chotulal Ranchodji, who goes on later to Ahmedabad, he had also tried to introduce one mill in Bharuch, but it was soon closed down. The that was a mill trying to make yarn. During the 20th century, many cotton mills came up in Bharuch. These were these were Indian capitalists who had gained some wealth from the cotton trade, and they were now putting it in industrialization. But the Industrial Revolution, as we all know, drained away the wealth of India and made England more prosperous.
Yes. Okay. Lots of thanks for such a lovely talk in the chat and from us at Khaki. It was really a very, very, very interesting talk. And I think maybe there's one more in it from Bharuch because there seems to be so much more history. But just before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that we have a talk on the Naval Uprising of 1946, an in-person talk at the Khaki Lab next Friday. That's the 7th of August at 6 o'clock. It's the 80th anniversary of the uprising, and we have a talk by Dr. Shrikant Kesnur, who is a naval historian, and it's going to be quite interesting. So if you would like to come to the Khaki Lab in person next Friday, that's the 7th of August at 6 o'clock, please do join us then. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you, Meher, once again for taking time off to do this talk. And we look forward to seeing you in the future again. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much, Khaki, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you to the lovely audience for their interesting questions. And thank you very much.